We also reached out to parents. We engaged with parents to make sure that the home environment would also be conducive to learning. But I think this is a high touch approach that was feasible in our context because we've got a limited number of students, right? Relative to, let's say, a large university. Our student population is just under about 1,200, which lends itself to some of these measures that we're able to take. So these were just some of the challenges that we anticipated at the time that we made the decision. We didn't have it all figured out, but we also thought through some of the mitigating strategies that we had the resources to actually implement in order to make online, the best that it could be for our context. And I'm happy to say that, interestingly, most of our student population, 99% really of our students, were able to finish the term online. So exceeding our expectation, which was about 80% of our student population. And then fortunately for us as well, our seniors were able to complete their year online and are not having to come back to campus now that there's a soft reopening of universities in Ghana. So those are some of the pieces coming from the Ashesi side.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. I picked up a few things. I think you talked about the issue of equity. You talked about collaboration. You talked about resources. You talked about adaptability, which is something that we would like to dive into later on. I'd like to invite Mr. Kader to share with us the experience of A.D.U in Niger.
Sure, thank you, Araba. So in Niger, what we did was really, we were taken by surprise. I would say we were monitoring the situation, but we were not really prepared to face this kind of situation. We are a very small university, and when the crisis started, pretty much every university in the country, I think we had 2 days to shut down our activities on the government's instruction. And we used one of those 2 days to do intensive trainings for the students and one for the faculty on how to use a Moodle platform that we didn't even have at the time. We just anticipated on, in case you have to learn online, these are the basic things to master. That's what we did. And then we used the 1 week after we closed to really push with our internal teams to complete the ongoing development of our online platform. And we put all the resources and focus them only on that. And we were fortunate after a week of sweat and tears, maybe even blood, we managed to have a functional platform, not an ideal one, but a functional one. And then we resumed the courses online. So contrary to Ashesi, that went into a kind of planning, like a planning system. We did not plan at all. We just did it. We did it because for us, that was the only option available. Stopping the courses and forfeiting the academic year was not an option that we could accept. So we just decided to do it. And I think that's also what helped us to make it happen. And this is very, very engraved in A.D.U's culture. We just do things like the planning of this university. In the planning, we were supposed to launch in 3 years, and we launched in 3 months. We just did it knowing that we were not ready. And that's what we did even now. We were not ready for online, but we just did it. And again, we were fortunate, it worked. So the first key challenge we met was with our students. 70% of our students are coming from really modest backgrounds. So lots of them couldn't afford the cost of internet. Internet is very expensive here and it's not very reliable. And but most of them had like smartphones. but not very smart, but still smartphones. So they could download the Moodle mobile app, and of course those from middle class could afford the computers, and the A.D.U offered computers to the students. So most of them, for those who didn't have their computers broken or something, they could have access. So anyway, we went to the main telco operator in Niger and asked them to provide like 5 gigs of internet for each student to help them get access to the online courses. And in the negotiation with them, we ended up reaching an agreement where they would whitelist our server, meaning that anyone connecting to our server to learn from it will do it for free. They will not charge whenever this address is being used, and that was a game changing. It doubled the number of students who were connecting on the platform, and it made it very, very easy for them. And then after that, we offered that platform solution to the Ministry of Higher Education so that it can expand to other schools as well. And they asked us to help them with the public universities. They put us in the committee to work to bring the public universities online, and we're proposing to them the same solutions based on Moodle that we are using here at A.D.U. And it provided us really with a very big influence in the decision making during the crisis and post-crisis. So for us, really, somehow this COVID crisis was a blessing. It allowed us to move much faster than we could ever in terms of online. And it also allowed us to put online at the center of everything. And just to give you an example, the government lifted some of the measures and reopened the schools from June to July, so schools can catch up on what they missed. And we are basically the only university in the country that is on track on their semester, and that will finish the academic year in June. So we didn't reopen because our own assessment of the risk is probably higher than the government. So we keep doing online, and we intend to keep online even like for next year, not like fully online, but because even before COVID, we had challenges getting high-level faculty here to engage with our community. We just realized that online is the way to go for us, and we will keep it at the center, and we will host classes on campus, but we will we'll still have the instructors and faculty from all over the world, and that will be our new way to go. So blended.
Thank you very much, Kader. Thank you so much. I mean, I like what you said about the surprise element. Unlike Ashesi that went into planning a lot before executing, you talked about learning by doing, and you taking advantage of the surprise element. You also spoke about the cost of internet, some of the challenges. We'll come back to that. But I think another point that buttresses what was said earlier was the issue of collaboration and how that becomes a game changer. And the fact that aside everything, there is some blessing in the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to invite Prof. Baylie to share the experiences of Kepler University in Rwanda, and then we'll go to our next guest. Prof. Baylie, over to you.
Thank you, Araba. So I will start with the closure. We announced our campuses closed on March 16. So as has been said, the first thing is really to make sure that everyone is safe back home. That was successfully done in a week, but there was some student who couldn't make it home. So we have to discuss with the government and really meet the requirement of the government and make them to stay in our dormitory. So that was done. And step two, after 1 week was really to make sure our staff and students, the physical and the mental well-being of our students. So we established 2 urgent committees, focusing on one on the staff affair committee, on another student affair committee, to make sure to reach everyone. The physical support in terms of logistics, in terms of, in some cases, financial support, both to the staff and to the students who are struggling in that transition. And then we carry out a survey using Google Form to send to everyone to really identify where they are in terms of electricity, in terms of internet, in terms of telephone coverage. So we mapped out all our staff and students, the condition they are in. That really gave us a background whether we can really offer our academic service online or not. So based on that map, we found out that, of course, all of our refugee students, amounting 150 or so, couldn't really access anything because of the electricity situation. And the other students, the majority, we found out that they have access to power and internet and telephone coverage. So we discussed how to really implement our academic service online. As you know, our model is actually the main model. The degree is online and self-paced. However, we provide what we call foundation program to bridge the gap the students are having to really join our online platform, the degree program, that used to be given face-to-face, so that need to go online. And then we have modules that we provide to our students face-to-face to really help them to acquire contextual learning to get a job. Our focus is 90% employment within 6 months. So to make sure that our students are really relevant to the market, we have modules that helps our students to compete in the labor market. So that those modules that used to be given face-to-face has to really now be given online. And the other is our career services. That's very intensive career service that we offer face-to-face, has to also go online. So we, our staff digital literacy and experience in terms of using Canvas, in terms of using the online platform was already high. So it was kind of relatively easy transition to move to all those services online. After we moved the service online, then we have to really solve the problem of those who don't have electricity. So one thing we did was to submit a project proposal to European Union to buy charging units. And still we are waiting for that. But while we are waiting for that, we found also another solution that without violating the government regulation of social distancing, we discussed with other organizations who are working in the refugee camps, and also our facility. The students can come based on program basis to charge their laptop and go back and continue their studies. In the refugee camp, that's what we are doing. Our program is self-paced, so this means like a student can progress based on their skill and their potential. So right now, with this effort, most of our students actually, except 8 students with no electricity, no internet, no telephone coverage, which we are discussing with them to relocate, they are continuing online program. in terms of when we see how students are participating online, we are tracking their performance in terms of some learning outcome. We were worried about a disparity that might come due to different involvement in the household, because different of our students, for example, coming from the refugee, and also women may be much more involved in the family matter than the boys. So we are tracking their learning outcome if that is affecting them in any way. Our initial data shows not, but it's really very sketchy, the data. And the other things that we are really concerned about is we are going to have a graduate. They are going to complete in June, end of June, actually, kind of July, 150 students. So the labor market has changed very much. So we are also working hard how to really market, how to really find job for this student, how we can support students to get job as we are completing their program. Giving the academic service is one thing, but really getting them a job is also another thing that's going to be affected drastically this year. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Baylie. You also introduced a few interesting things. You talked about a survey, and I believe that was to bring on board student voices in the midst of all this transitioning, which I think is a good thing. You also brought up the issue of cost patients for this whole transitioning online and how you addressed it. You also talked about equity, but a new dimension to that equity, the issue of equity, is the gender sensitivity part, which I think we should be looking at. And then the last thing I picked up is the change in the labor market. I hope we will be able to come to that. For now, I will invite Prof. Barnor from UPSA to tell us the experience, and then we will go on. Thank you. Prof. Barnor. Prof. Barnor, if you could unmute and let us have your experience. Whilst waiting for Prof. Barnor, I'd like to come back to Yasmin, and then hopefully Prof. Barnor can join us. Was there Prof. Baylie talked about cost implications for this transitioning. What was your experience, and what would you say was the bottom line for you in all this in terms of cost?
Yeah, we definitely had to factor in sort of the cost implications of going online, but balancing that against basically the financial situation of the university, keeping in mind that we were completely shutting down. So there was, sort of savings that we anticipated that were channeled towards underpinning and supporting online instruction. But certainly, the provisioning of data was a huge piece, and other infrastructure to support faculty and students being able to access the online content. I do know that a number of our faculty members also leveraged, to support online instruction, other tools, web-based tools that we had to subscribe to support it. And I think an interesting cost component that Ashesi also factored into its thinking in the broad conversation about shutting down was, we're on a campus in Brekusu that is quite self-contained. And so we had a lot of concern when shutting down on, what would happen to all the auxiliary staff that we have, specifically our janitorial staff, our landscaping staff, our caterers, and figuring out how best within our cost structure we could continue to support them during this very difficult time. So all of those factors came into play in looking at the financial implications of an online off-campus model.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. You talked about extending support to third parties. This is interesting in a time when the universities themselves are cash-strapped or having issues. But I think Prof. Barnor is on, and so I'll invite Prof. Barnor to share the experience of UPSA and what factors they took into consideration on whether to go online, not to go online, or even adopt some hybrid form. Prof. Barnor.
Yes, so thank you, Araba. The UPSA is a public university, so there was a directive from the presidency to have all public universities closed down. And we are regulated by the National Council for Tertiary Education. So they were sending specific instructions to us as to the roadmap towards teaching and learning, or facilitating teaching and learning. And there was a very clear directive that all public universities should move online. But prior to that, somewhere in 2018, the university had already started developing capabilities for online, because we have experienced a spike in student population. As it stands now, total 10,000. So we realized that apart from the brick and mortar, we need to develop extra capacity to absorb the increase in students. So the directive from the National Council for Tertiary Education, before UPSA transition online, we asked some few questions as our guiding principles to strategize for the transition. We tried to find solution to the changing principles from a brick and mortar environment to online teaching and learning resulting from COVID-19. And then we questioned whether UPSA's guiding principles as professional and academic institution will change to both students and faculty, and what would be the likely changes that will occur as a result of the implications of deployment of the learning management system, deploying the learning management system. We also question whether by deploying technology or facilitating online would enhance or degrade the quality of teaching and learning. So within the context of this webinar, perhaps we may also further ask whether the changes that we see now are forever. And if they are forever, what strategies do we need to adopt as a result of an emergence of a situation for which we don't have control, perhaps now? Now, if we found a solution to the current situation, or maybe a vaccine is found, do we have to revert to pre-coronavirus approaches as we were doing brick and mortar situation, or do we maintain online teaching as a new normal in higher education? So these are questions which shape or provide possibilities for rebuilding or evolving our institution on the far side of COVID-19 for the future. And then we also believe that the situation will provide an opportunity for growth through the crisis. And then also it will foster other alliances different from alliances that we have already established using the face-to-face or the brick and mortar. So we had an executive meeting and we concluded that we need to embrace an emerging vision for the current situation, also for post-crisis situation, and found solutions and also map strategies to ensure that the quality in our teaching and learning strategies, should a pandemic strike in the future, remains intact. So for us in UPSA, it is not just a new normal, but the situation was an emergent form of environmental factors that transitioned our university into what we call virtual learning platform. So that's the situation. Then the transition period, we realized that issues about connectivity was a problem. Students also had challenges. Of course, students come from various backgrounds, and also issues about location and access was also a problem. So what we proceeded to do was to talk to the telcos. So we had MTN coming on board. We also had Vodafone coming on board. And what they did was that they identified all those links that are connected to teaching and learning and zero-rated them. So in other words, students can just go online, click on the various links, for instance, all the facilities in the library, they are all zero rated, and then the virtual platform is zero rated, and anything connected to teaching and learning was zero rated. So the issue about equity that Yasmin spoke about, we found a way to address it by, again, fostering that linkages that I earlier spoke about. And this is exactly where I'm coming from, that in the midst of the crisis, how do you strategize to now normalize the situation by ensuring that whilst you don't drop on quality of teaching and learning, you also foster new linkages that will improve teaching and learning, and at the same time taking care of those who cannot afford the online teaching and learning. So these are some of the things that we put in place as a result of government directive and as a result of directive coming from the National Council for Tertiary Education. Thank you, Araba.
Thank you very much, Prof. Barnor. I like what you said, that in your deliberations, in your discussions, one of the major things was how to embrace the new normal and work with that. You also buttressed the points that have been brought up about telcos, and I think I'd like to say a big thank you to the telcos for partnering with the universities. We couldn't have done without you. Thank you. You also talked about opportunities for growth in the midst of this pandemic, which I think it's something we all need to look at. And finally, you talked about maintaining quality whilst ensuring equity. Others have talked about equity, but you've brought in a new dimension. Attendants, I would like to encourage you to post your questions on the Q&A session, and then we will try to answer them. There are a few questions, and I promised participants and attendants that we will try and answer their questions and make it as interactive as possible. Okay, the issue of somebody, Prof. Amidu Sani from Nigeria, is asking how can we assist students with poor financial and technical capabilities to take advantage of online learning, remoteness of places and unaffordability of data costs. I think this has come up, but I don't know if any one of you would like to address that. I always defer to the lady first and come to the man. So the issue of making sure that there's equity, were there any unusual things that were done to ensure this? Yasmin?
I think we have sort of touched upon that piece across our respective contexts. But I think one piece that I would like to perhaps also highlight on the Ashesi side was just the support also from our donor community. I think there was a lot of just good responses when we reached out and laid out the challenges and the support that our students would need. And just in terms of the logistical pieces of getting home, but for some of our students from really poor backgrounds, right? Being able to support in other contexts with meals, et cetera. These were all requests that we were able to put in front of our network of funders, and they were very responsive. So I do want to highlight that piece as well, just in terms of the involvement of the donor community in supporting these efforts for more equity.
Yasmin, Prof. Baylie, in the conversations prior to this session, you mentioned working with institutions where some of the refugees were able to go and charge their laptops. Would you kindly share that with us?
Yeah, thank you. I think just to add on that, supporting the student to really need support in that transition, one of the things that we did is really the refugee community. That's the largest student population. 25% of our students are from refugee background. So they are now living in a refugee camps. So we provide them, every student at Kepler has a laptop. So now everyone has a laptop with their own. And then the other one is we provide a communication support every month, a modest amount, 10,000 Rwandan franc to support them to really pay the cost of their communication online to access our courses. The Student Affairs Committee that I shared with you earlier identified some students with very critical, serious problem of covering, as has been said, their really living cost, accommodation, eating, and so on and so on. So we have to support them. So again, thank you, as has been said, for donor community that this support was provided to our students. So those 8 students that I mentioned also live outside the telephone coverage areas. We have to bring them to a new location. So we have to cover some of their costs, including accommodation. So that's in terms of mental support. I must mention that during the closure, the number of students coming to our counselor seeking for mental support increased very high, but now it comes down. So when they come with all sorts of challenges, we were able to identify and provide different support for them.
Very much. I have one Notifafa Domon asking, thank you for the opportunity to join the 2020 Education Collaborative. In terms of adaptability, will Yasmin say that COVID-19 is the real test for the Ashesi team compared to other challenges they might have had in the past? What are the implications of COVID-19 for future of education in Ashesi? And then we will move to the other ones. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. I think the first part of the question, as I mentioned earlier, I've been at Ashesi 2 years. So relative to other challenges that the university has experienced, I can't really chime in there, given my 2-year span. But I can safely say that this will definitely go down in the books. But we're very fortunate to have a very resilient team that has been able to get through this. In terms of the second part of the question, which is really the implications of COVID-19 for the future of education in our context, I do think that this has been, like Kader said in his context, a blessing in a way, in many ways. I do think that it has uncovered new ways of us thinking about instruction, new ways about us thinking about space constraints and other configurations that we've been trying to unpack, especially as the university thinks through its next decade in our strategic planning. I also think that there's an interesting dynamic in terms of students becoming agents of their own education in this context, really taking in the reins in this context that we can really learn from also in this context. So a lot of new learnings that I think will definitely catalyze the way that we proceed at Ashesi, especially as we go into the university's next decade.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. There's a question about what, and I'd like Prof. Barnor to take this. What did your universities do to support your lecturers pedagogically, but also emotionally?
Yeah, so prior to COVID-19, we've had several training for our lecturers because we intend to run some of our academic programs solely online with some blended approach. So there has been several training prior to COVID-19. So what we had to do now is to ensure that we test our systems. So as part of testing our systems, we had to provide additional training for faculty to make sure that they are well adept with the application of the management system that we deploy. It also gave us the opportunity to build an in-house learning management system, which prior to that, we wouldn't have been in the position to do. But it tapped on the capability of the staff that we have at the IT department. And resulting from that, because it is in-house, they were able to collaborate with faculty and it's had buy-in. we also had to give some sort of emotional support for faculty, because this is somebody teaching face-to-face, and then all of a sudden the person had to move online. And it's a very difficult situation for them emotionally. So we had to provide some sort of emotional support for them. Also, there were some financial support that was given to them to assist them get the required data to be able to use it for other methods to support students' learning. Because, for instance, somewhere yesterday we reopened school, and out of 14,000 students, we had about 4,300 students in the final year who came, who are supposed to report, but only 2 students reported. And then what really happened was that because the faculty had constantly engaged them, they were able to take up their problems at first hand and solve them before school reopened. So as a result of those support that we gave to the faculty, we were able to also meet the students' needs online. So we provided emotional support and financial support somehow. However, because we are a public institution, the government promised to also support us. So we designed a document that captured all the line items in terms of costs, and then we presented it to government for assistance. It is yet to come, but we have to move on. So we are financing some of these activities using our internally generated fund.
Thank you very much, Prof. Barnor. There's a question from Kwame in African Leadership University in Rwanda. And the question is to do with accreditation. And I'd like any of our universities that have to do with accreditation to answer this. Yasmin, Prof. Barnor, they're talking about whether you had to request special accreditation for the online studies, or you were able to do it. Yasmin, will you take this up, and then we'll come to Kader. There are specific questions for you, so I'll come to you shortly. Yasmin?
Yeah, so within the context of Ashesi, we didn't have to seek formal sort of accreditation for our online program at the time we made the decision. However, there's a circular, I believe, that came from the NAB in the midst of when we were rolling out online, laying out sort of the expectations and the minimum standards across universities. And so we've made sure to, throughout the process, really document every aspect of what we've done for online instruction, for how we've done assessments, so as to be able to demonstrate that we've adhered to the general guidelines that have been provided. And we've tried to make sure that we're generally in touch with the NAB as, of course, plans evolve for what's going to happen, right, for our next upcoming semester as well.
Thank you. Kader, there's a specific question before I come to. The question is, what are the implications of online instruction for assessment, test, etc.? And this is from Feto in Gaborone, Botswana. So Kader, implications for assessment.
Sure, thank you, Araba, again. And yeah, this is a very good question. Moving online comes with, I think Baylie mentioned that earlier. Moving online just comes with new ways of approaching the whole thing. It's not only like taking the current content and bringing them on the online system, but rethinking totally how the faculty engage the students and how they keep them learning, and how they keep them contributing to the whole quality of the classroom. So indeed, the learning ways change, the assessment will change as well, and the engagement of both parties will change. At A.D.U, what we did was to use the current Moodle system, which has normally ways to assess the different students, but also focus on lots of projects, kind of hands-on projects that will allow the students to be in the real world more than the written test. And I guess the additional thing that I would like to add here is related to the fact that whenever it comes to like academic integrity and these questions, moving online makes it easier to detect and to prevent than the traditional way. So it's there are challenges. We faced new challenges, but I have to say it also came with the how can I put it, like the positive aspects that made somehow the work of the professors or instructors easier. And someone was asking how we did support the faculty pedagogically and emotionally. And I think sometimes I know the impact can be difficult emotionally, but in our case, the focus was on the students. And I think somehow for most professors, the fact that they were there to support emotionally the students, and the fact that some of the things were truly easier moving online than having the traditional physical classroom made it easier. And somehow by helping the students, it's like a care for themselves in terms of emotional support. I don't know if it makes sense, but yeah, that's.
Thank you, Kader.
That's my answer.
Before I go to the next question, I have a question I would like to ask any of the panelists. This was a question about how you supported faculty emotionally. My concern, having worked with students from marginalized backgrounds and vulnerable groups, were there any particular support systems put in place for students emotionally? And then I'd ask anybody who would like to speak to this.
Well, if I may take that, first, to transition students online, it's quite stressing for a student and any student who is well accustomed to brick and mortar. So what you have to do, or what we did, was that as part of test running the system, we integrate structures within the platform where students will have some hands-on experience on the system before actually going on the system to facilitate. So by that, they have live sessions with the lecturer. The lecturers also have similar live sessions, and then they also have live sessions with the students. So by having hands-on experience on the system, trying to talk to them, engaging them to let them know, sending memos to them, writing to them, letting them have their feedback, incorporating their feedback into the systems that we design. It's all part of the support systems that help them to emotionally settle onto the new platform that we deployed.
Thank you, Prof. Barnor. Anybody else? Just give a shot and then we'll go to the next one. Anybody else would like to talk about support systems for the students in particular, emotionally?
Yeah, just one thing that in terms of emotional support of the students, really these tips that are available in different platforms, how you can manage self-management during this COVID crisis. There are really useful tips that we share with the student to exercise, and we categorize how the student really, the most frequent things the student do during this pandemic. And we found out sport is, of course, number one. And a significant percentage of our students also use meditation, 32%. And there is also a student who are using, learning a new skill. So this kind of tip really helps them to engage themselves mentally.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I'm going to put two questions into one, and then we will, there's a question about fees, and I think we've talked about cost implications. We have Kaiser from the Nordic Africa Institute in Sweden asking, is non-payment of fees from students and their families who have been hit hard by the crisis an issue? And if yes, how have you dealt with this, or what is the plan to deal with this non-payment of fees? At the same time, there's another question from Shauna, which says, what are you learning as leaders of your institutions during this pandemic period? And what is your most significant ongoing challenge? Basically, what keeps you up at night? So 2 questions in one, issues of non-payment of fees and what keeps you up at night as leaders. And I think each of you will take turns answering this. I'll start with Yasmin, go to Professor Barnor, Kader, and then Prof. Baylie.
Yeah, so the first piece around fees. We're not seeing any dramatic issues of our collection rates at the moment, but we are anticipating. We know that the macroeconomic dynamics in Ghana will affect our parents, and in looking at the upcoming semester, that is one of the pieces that we're trying to unpack internally around where we might be able to support in terms of financial aid or other means. So we're still monitoring that closely, but we're attuned to the fact that certainly the macroeconomic dynamics will impact families, and we need to be mindful of that in our planning. In terms of the second question, which is what keeps us up at night, I think at the moment, it's really all of the scenario planning and figuring out basically how we proceed, right, in this new normal. There's sort of the near term in terms of what happens in the fall semester with this added dynamic of a new class of freshmen entering into Ashesi and how we deal with those dynamics. And then there's ultimately also what happens beyond that. And with all of the unanswered questions around what the continued implications of the pandemic are, how long is it going to take for us to resume to some kind of normalcy, whatever that normalcy is. So I think that's what at the moment probably keeps me and the rest of the leadership up at night, basically trying to look into our crystal ball and figure out the future.
Thank you, Yasmin. Kader, what keeps you up at night and other issues of non-payment of fees?
What Yasmin said resonated a lot with me, actually. And yeah, I guess for us, it's just like she said, it's a form of planning, but I would say not the Ashesi way. So in Niger, most students, because of the landscape of the educational systems configuration, most students, especially those from middle class to upper class families, go abroad for studies. There's a lot of Nigerian community, for instance, in Ghana, they come after high school for higher education. And this year, because of the COVID situation, all the information and feedback we're getting from the different focus groups and just our assessment of the whole situation is it's more like people this year are less likely to go study abroad for various reasons, from the parents' risk assessment to the borders and so on and so forth. So for us, the question becomes, how can we position in such a short time, like A.D.U as the one place where all these people will come? That really is the biggest question that I am thinking about these days, and our management meetings always revolve around this, and that's what we're working on. For us, this challenge becomes an opportunity, and it's almost like a gamble for us to really not miss this turn, to position ourselves as the alternative that will reveal itself in a way that even moving forward, people will not forcefully need to look for solutions out of the country. It should be a choice, not a necessity to go abroad. And for the first part of your question, I think since COVID started, we haven't gotten any payment from any student. So it shows you the level of urgency and the crisis on the financial side.
Wow, that's a big one. Prof. Barnor, what keeps you up at night, and then issues of non-payment?
Well, the fees for the university is determined by government, by parliament. But COVID-19 has brought in new challenges for the economy of Ghana. So there are issues about costs and whether parents can afford, and what will be the role of government in ensuring that every Ghanaian child has the opportunity for at least tertiary level education. The other issue is also about the implementation of the free senior high school policy. And resulting from that, we expect a spike in intake in the next academic year. The question that keeps me up at night is this, what is the current situation like, and what is it going to be tomorrow? And if this is a situation that it's going to persist, how do we design our various academic programs to be able to reach our potential students who will be enrolling 2020, 2021? Now, it's a very difficult situation for us. And then also, how do we provide the necessary training and skill for our faculty to be able to meet these students and maintain the quality of teaching and learning that we have provided over the years? These are some of the things that we've been thinking about as management of the university. However, it has also given us the opportunity recently to now design new methods to now put almost all our programs online using virtual, and also have them also blended. So whichever way, we are also strategizing to be able to meet our students, and also government must come in to support the poor and the needy as a public university.
Thank you very much, Prof. Barnor. Prof. Baylie, you have the last word.
Thank you very much. I will start with what keeps me in the night. So for me, really what keeps me up in the night, every day I can say, is how can I get a job for 157 intelligent, able, competent graduates the coming months. Really, the labor market dynamics, how it is evolving, is very difficult to track. What kind of skill, what kind of really knowledge, what kind of attitude, what kind of really critical things are needed in the labor market now? How can we respond to that? Is really the critical part of the challenge that I am really struggling every day. So anyone attending this meeting, if you have really a job or something, an opportunity, I would love you to contact me. I will give you a very, a student that can type 50 words per minute, a student who really can really think critically and solve problems. So really that is the part that I am struggling with.
Thank you, Prof.
So the fee is the sustainability, and that's all.
Okay, sustainability and getting jobs for our students. There's two questions that we can't leave without addressing, and I'm going to put them all into one. There's a concern about steps being taken to safeguard the integrity of online examinations, right? Inline examinations and the integrity. At the same time, there's also a question on making sure that we do not the universities do not become mills for churning out degrees because of the online. So again, we're talking about integrity of the online program and how do we ensure, is there anybody on the continent, an association, a group of people or an institution in the various countries monitoring and assessing to ensure that online does not become a mill for just churning out degrees. And I'd like each of you to take 1 minute stab at this, and then we'll bring our session to a close. I'll start with Yasmin. Ladies first.
Thanks. It's a very important question. And one that I do agree we need to grapple with as a country and just continent-wide. In terms of just what Ashesi has done or tried to do to ensure not just high quality in our online instruction platform, but also just high integrity. I think the university generally, one of the tenets really is the tenet of ethics. And so our students going into this format really have been grounded in our social honor code, our examination code, et cetera. So we rely on that, and I think it is an important piece to highlight. The other piece that I also like to highlight is that we really did try to leverage the technology through our LMS, our learning management system, to really also bolster up our ability to ensure that, you know, there are tools to assess whether or not examinations are being conducted in an ethical way. And so some of the things that the tools that we use helped us to do were things like, you know, randomized questioning. So no, you know, two students or batches of students getting the same questions on the same exam. The ways through the tool that we use to assess how long a student has been on the online platform and, you know, when they might have logged off and logged back in. So I think our faculty were very conscientious about this piece and ensuring that we leveraged sort of the technology piece, but also some of the softer pieces that we've ingrained through the Ashesi culture to make it work. But I do think that the question around making sure that, you know, now that this opening has emerged for online, that it doesn't become sort of the mill for degrees is an important question that I think we all, as university leadership, need to continue grappling with.
Prof.
Yeah, so I think the question is about integrity.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it's about it. So what we have done is that as part of the learning management platform that we deployed, we integrated systems to check for issues on plagiarism. So we have some similarity checks whenever a student put in his or her solution. Also, we have adopted a teneting as part of it. But let me talk about the role of the National Accreditation Board in this. At all levels of the implementation of the online platform during COVID-19 period to end this academic year, what we did was that we were sending periodic report about the milestones that we achieved for each of the steps that we took in the area of setting examination questions, the moderation of examination questions, and then also giving the examination questions to the students to answer them. And I think these are some of the things that we did to get a feedback from experts from the National Accreditation Board to also advise the students how to improve on the systems that we have put in place. For us, it's a learning process. The issue about online and integrity, it's it's not straightforward, because the question is, the student behind the system over there, is the student the person actually responding to the questions that you have set? I know that there has been several software in place to check all those things. For instance, the computer that you have been using over time or the tablet that you have been using over time, give a feedback as to whether you have changed location and so on and so forth. But I think it's still a learning process. It is an opportunity for us to develop adequate system to check whether students are not cheating at the other end of the spectrum. And it will be a debate that will never end today. But for now, I think institutions need to put adequate structures in place to check on whether the students are plagiarizing, check on the level of similarity of the answers that they present, and whether they are the students who actually provided the answers that was given to them by way of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Barnor. We're running out of time, but I think basically what we're saying is that we are all thinking about integrity as we move online. There's one more question, which is in French. So Kader, get ready, and Prof. Baylie. Bonsoir, chers panélistes. Ma question est de savoir, est-ce que nous avons les moyens nécessaires pour aller vers les cours en ligne? Anybody want to take that? Les moyens nécessaires pour aller vers les cours en ligne. Kader?
I'm not getting the sound. Okay, I'm not getting the sound.
Can you hear me, Kader? So basically the person is asking whether we have the financial resources to maintain these online programs.
So sorry, Araba, I was talking to my mute. Do we have the financial resources to maintain online? In case of A.D.U, I would say no. But I would like to give the bigger picture here. You know, since we transitioned online, some of our costs went down. Right, so that happens in all the universities. Electricity is a big one; it goes down. Water is not that big, but it goes down as well. Some of the faculty costs also go down because you have people who will come in to volunteer to teach. So I think on some aspects we made savings. And to develop our current platform as it is, we didn't need, it didn't require additional costs. We asked our internal team to develop that. They had to commit much more energy to understand the different parameters and get it to work, but they did it, and it's continuously being improved. Now, as we are bringing online at the center, I think we will need more resources, and we already started discussing with our traditional donors to see how they can support us get a much bigger one. This one is hosting about 200 students. We would like to have something that can go to thousands of students. So we can put ourselves in a type of long-term thinking. But definitely no, we as we stand now, we are far from getting the resources to build that, and we will absolutely need the external help for that.
So I think we've actually gone way, way beyond our time, and I'd like to bring this to an end. Thank you, everyone. We've had quite an engaging time. We've engaged with representatives from a range of universities. Ashesi University, a relatively small small-sized private university. Kepler University that uses a blended learning model. UPSA, a large public university. And A.D.U, a relatively new university with great ambitions. What is clear to me is that all universities responded to the COVID-19 pandemic one way or the other, and that the factors that affected the decisions are varied. Decisions appear to have been made based on available resources, time constraints, location, and complexities of their specific situation. Moving forward, I guess we can say that even though the COVID-19 pandemic brought challenges to the universities, it has also allowed us to innovate as universities of higher education. It is our hope that these innovations will continue and that we will continue to exchange ideas in the interest of African higher education. Thank you, everyone, and let the conversations continue. Thank you very much to our panelists, and I hope we've all had a good session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Araba. Thank you, everyone.